When the United Kingdom constructed the planet's inaugural wind tunnel research facility back in 1871, it launched what would become 6 decades of Western technological dominance in aerodynamic testing. For the People's Republic of China, barely finding its footing as a newly formed nation in the early 1950s, such advanced engineering seemed impossibly distant. 3 decades ago, China's capabilities in wind tunnel research trailed so severely behind industrialized nations that prominent American aerospace specialists boldly predicted the Chinese couldn't possibly bridge this gap for at least half a century. These weren't just casual observations. They represented the widespread belief that certain technologies would remain forever out of reach for developing nations. Yet Chinese researchers refused to accept this verdict as final. Rather than being discouraged by such dismissive predictions, they transformed skepticism into motivation. Throughout the last 10 years especially, China's scientific community has pursued a strategy of homegrown innovation, delivering breakthrough after breakthrough that has rewritten the global aerospace landscape. The year 2023 marked a watershed moment. Chinese engineers unveiled the JF-22 hypersonic wind tunnel, a technological marvel capable of generating wind speeds reaching an extraordinary Mach 33. To put this in perspective, this surpasses even the most advanced American hypersonic facility, which tops out at Mach 30. The revelation sent shockwaves through Western aerospace circles, as it demonstrated conclusively that China had not merely caught up, but had potentially leaped 2 decades ahead in certain aspects of wind tunnel technology. But what makes the JF-22 hypersonic wind tunnel such a game-changing achievement? How did Chinese scientists accomplish what skeptics deemed impossible, establishing a commanding lead over the United States in this critical field? Before we explore these questions, if you're finding this content valuable, please subscribe to our channel to stay updated with our latest investigations into global technology and innovation. Now, let's dive deep into this remarkable story. Understanding wind tunnels. The invisible infrastructure behind flight. The term wind tunnel technology might sound abstract or overly technical, but its applications touch virtually every aspect of modern aviation and aerospace engineering. From the earliest days of powered flight, engineers have relied on wind tunnels to understand how air moves around flying objects, knowledge essential for designing everything from commercial airliners to military jets. As technology has evolved and our ambitions have expanded beyond conventional flight, wind tunnel applications have proliferated throughout the aerospace sector. The fundamental challenge they address remains constant. How do you test an aircraft's flight characteristics before it ever leaves the ground? The solution is elegantly simple in concept, though extraordinarily complex in execution. Engineers create precisely scaled models of aircraft and mount them inside specialized chambers. High-velocity airstreams then blast across these models, replicating the aerodynamic forces that would act upon a full-sized aircraft during actual flight. This allows designers to observe, measure, and analyze flight behavior, while the aircraft exists only on paper and in miniature form. This capability proves invaluable for evaluating design concepts, identifying potential problems, and optimizing performance, all before investing the enormous resources required to build a prototype. It's the difference between educated guesswork and data-driven certainty in aerospace engineering. The historical landscape. A century of wind tunnel development. Looking back across the 20th century, the evolution of wind tunnel technology reads like a chronicle of great power competition. The United States, the Soviet Union, and Germany consistently occupied the vanguard of research and development, each pushing the boundaries of what these facilities could achieve. China's journey in this field, however, followed a far more difficult trajectory. The nation didn't establish its first wind tunnel until 1936, already decades behind Western powers. And tragically, this pioneering facility barely had time to contribute to Chinese aviation before disaster struck. The outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War brought devastation that extended far beyond human casualties. Japanese military forces destroyed China's nascent wind tunnel infrastructure during their invasion, dealing a crushing blow to the country's embryonic aerospace research capabilities. This forced Chinese scientists to abandon their work just as it was beginning, while Western nations continued advancing their technologies unimpeded. By the time the war ended and China could resume research, the technological gap had widened dramatically. Chinese capabilities lagged approximately 5 decades behind the leading nations, a chasm that seemed nearly impossible to cross. The post-war struggle. Perseverance without progress. Despite overwhelming challenges, Chinese scientists refused to abandon their aspirations in wind tunnel technology. After the war's conclusion, researchers attempted to restart their programs with whatever resources they could marshal. But for more than a decade, meaningful breakthroughs remained frustratingly elusive. The necessary expertise, equipment, and funding simply weren't available. Everything changed in 1955 with a single event that would reshape China's entire trajectory in aerospace research. That year, the nation welcomed home Chen Shusen, a scientist whose credentials and expertise were recognized worldwide. Chen had studied and worked in the United States, contributing to American rocket development before returning to his homeland. Upon his return, Chen assumed leadership of the Institute of Mechanics within the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Under his guidance, Chinese wind tunnel research received the expert direction and institutional support it had desperately needed. By 1957, just 2 years after Chen's homecoming, China officially restarted its wind tunnel development programs with renewed focus and determination. The hydrogen-oxygen breakthrough. Choosing a different path. During this period of renewed activity, Chinese researchers achieved their first significant innovation, developing what they called a hydrogen-oxygen combustion-driven shock tube. This represented a fundamentally different approach to generating the extreme conditions needed for hypersonic testing. At the time, many researchers globally viewed this combustion-driven methodology as potentially revolutionary for future wind tunnel design. However, the technology faced serious criticisms. The airflow it produced wasn't as clean or consistent as alternative methods, and the use of hydrogen and oxygen together posed inherent safety concerns. These limitations prevented the approach from gaining widespread international acceptance. For China, though, this technology offered a path forward that didn't require access to Western expertise or equipment. During the Cold War era, the United States and its allies maintained strict technology embargoes against China, deliberately blocking access to advanced aerospace research tools and knowledge. Chinese scientists had to innovate within these constraints, working with whatever resources and approaches they could develop independently. Operating under these extraordinarily difficult conditions, with minimal equipment, limited funding, and no international cooperation, Chinese researchers pressed forward. Through countless experiments, inevitable failures, painstaking analysis, and iterative improvements, they finally achieved success in 1958, completing China's first-generation shock tube. This accomplishment, modest as it might have seemed compared to Western facilities, proved absolutely crucial. It established a foundation of practical knowledge and operational experience that would support all future development. The technological acceleration. From zero to competitive. Building upon their 1958 breakthrough, Chinese scientists entered the 1960s with growing confidence and momentum. They leveraged their initial successes to develop increasingly sophisticated facilities. The JF-4 straight-through shock wind tunnel came first, followed by the JF-4A reflection shock wind tunnel, and then the JF-8 shock tunnel. Each represented incremental progress, as Chinese capabilities evolved from nothing to something genuinely functional. By the 1990s, this accumulated expertise enabled a major advance. Chinese engineers constructed a hydrogen-oxygen detonation-driven, high-enthalpy shock tunnel, a facility that made global headlines by becoming the world's first successfully operational detonation-driven shock tunnel. This wasn't merely catching up. In this specific technology, China had actually pioneered something new. This achievement established critical infrastructure and know-how for the next phase, serious hypersonic research. China had finally positioned itself to compete in one of aerospace's most demanding and strategically important domains. The 21st century push racing toward hypersonic capability. As the new millennium began, the global aerospace community became intensely focused on hypersonic flight, specifically the development of scramjet engines capable of sustained flight at speeds exceeding Mach 5. The military and economic implications of mastering such technology were obvious to every major power. Chinese scientists recognized that their nation couldn't afford to fall behind in what many called hyper-super technology. In 2006, they proposed constructing a shock tunnel capable of accurately reproducing the extreme conditions of hypersonic flight. Government authorities, understanding the strategic importance, rapidly approved the project. By January 2008, the State Key Laboratory of High-Temperature Gas Dynamics officially launched what would become the JF-12 program. This initiative drew upon 5 decades of experience with hydrogen-oxygen detonation methods and 15 years of specific work on detonation-driven wind tunnel technology. After 4 years of intensive development, the JF-12 shock tunnel reached completion and passed official acceptance on May 14, 2012. The facility's specifications were impressive by any standard. It was the world's largest hypersonic shockwave wind tunnel at the time of its completion. More significantly, it became the first facility globally that could precisely replicate the conditions aircraft experienced during hypersonic flight. This achievement solved a fundamental problem that had frustrated aerospace engineers worldwide for 60 years: how to accurately test hypersonic designs on the ground. With the JF-12, China announced its arrival in the top tier of global wind tunnel capabilities. For the first time, Chinese aerospace research operated at the same level as the world's most advanced programs. The audacious gambit, announcing the JF-22. Most nations would have paused after such an accomplishment, consolidating their gains and gradually planning next steps. China, however, had different ideas. In 2018, Beijing made a stunning announcement that caught the international aerospace community off guard. Chinese authorities revealed they were launching an ambitious new program, the JF-22 Hypersonic Wind Tunnel. The stated objectives were remarkably ambitious. China intended to address critical national needs in Earth-to-space round-trip flight technology while advancing the fundamental science of high-temperature gas dynamics. The facility would provide unprecedented capabilities for researching hypersonic flight technologies. Reaction from American aerospace professionals ranged from skepticism to outright disbelief. The prevailing view held that China had only just completed the JF-12. How could they possibly be ready to begin an even more advanced project so quickly? Many Western experts questioned whether China possessed the technical sophistication and resources for such a rapid advancement. These doubts seemed reasonable based on historical precedent. Major wind tunnel projects typically require decades from conception to completion. The notion that China could develop a next-generation facility just years after its previous breakthrough struck many observers as implausible, perhaps even propagandistic. Then, in July 2023, China delivered its answer to the skeptics. Official announcements confirmed that the JF-22 hypersonic wind tunnel had been fully constructed, tested, and formally accepted. It was operational, and its capabilities exceeded even optimistic predictions. The JF-22 specifications, redefining what's possible. So what exactly makes the JF-22 hypersonic wind tunnel such an extraordinary achievement? The numbers tell a compelling story. The facility can simulate conditions across an exceptionally wide altitude range, from approximately 20,000 meters all the way to 100,000 meters. This upper boundary places testing in the region where Earth's atmosphere begins transitioning to space. More specifically, the JF-22 can reproduce airflow conditions at altitudes between 40,000 and 90,000 meters with exceptional accuracy. But altitude range alone doesn't capture the facility's true capabilities. The JF-22 generates airflow at speeds reaching Mach 33, significantly faster than any comparable facility operates. To understand what this means, consider that Mach 33 represents roughly 40,000 kilometers per hour, or about 25,000 miles per hour. For decades, the United States maintained an undisputed lead in wind tunnel technology. American facilities like the Lens X represented the global benchmark, capable of producing wind speeds up to Mach 30, extraordinarily fast by any measure. However, American facilities face a critical limitation. They can only sustain these maximum speeds for approximately 30 milliseconds before the test must end. The JF-22 not only exceeds American maximum speed by reaching Mach 33, but can maintain these conditions for 100 to 130 milliseconds. This might sound like a marginal difference, but in experimental physics, those additional milliseconds provide dramatically more data and enable far more comprehensive testing. The performance differential represents a genuine technological leap beyond current American capabilities. The implications of China's wind tunnel advantage, well, they really do extend far beyond scientific prestige. If Chinese engineers are able to successfully apply this technology to developing Earth-to-space transportation systems, the economic and strategic consequences could be, honestly, transformative. Just consider satellite deployment, which is currently one of the most expensive aspects of space operations. Industry analysts estimate that mature Earth-to-space round-trip systems could potentially reduce launch costs by about 90% compared to conventional rockets. Such cost reductions would fundamentally alter the economics of space access, possibly triggering a whole new era of space commercialization and utilization. Now, the military applications, while more troubling, are equally significant. Hypersonic weapons developed and tested using the JF-22 could travel at around 10 kilometers per second at Mach 33 velocities. At those speeds, a weapon launched from Chinese territory could strike targets in the continental United States in roughly 14 minutes, much faster than current missile defense systems are designed to intercept. This isn't speculation or propaganda. These are just simple physics calculations based on the JF-22's demonstrated capabilities. Current American defensive technologies simply weren't designed to counter threats moving at these velocities, creating a potential vulnerability that military planners must now address. Beyond its current capabilities, the JF-22 wind tunnel actually serves as essential infrastructure for China's next generation of aerospace projects. Chinese research teams have announced plans to develop what they're calling a stationary oblique detonation engine, a revolutionary propulsion concept that would operate fundamentally differently from conventional jet engines. According to Chinese aerospace engineers, this detonation engine design would achieve thermal efficiency approximately 50% higher than traditional propulsion systems. Such an efficiency gain would translate directly into extended range, higher speeds, or reduced fuel consumption, depending on how designers choose to exploit that advantage. China intends to incorporate this engine technology into future hypersonic aircraft, advanced aviation systems, and rocket platforms. If successful, it would represent yet another area where Chinese aerospace capability potentially exceeds Western alternatives. The JF-22 story, honestly, illustrates several broader trends that are reshaping global technology competition. First, it demonstrates that technological leadership is neither permanent nor predetermined. The same American experts who confidently predicted China would need 50 years to catch up now find themselves acknowledging Chinese advantages in specific domains. Second, it shows how sustained investment and long-term strategic planning can overcome substantial initial disadvantages. China's wind tunnel journey actually spans 7 decades from that first facility destroyed in 1936 to today's world-leading JF-22. This progress required patience, institutional memory, and a consistent resource commitment across multiple generations of scientists and engineers. Third, the achievement really highlights how technological restrictions and embargoes can sometimes backfire. Denied access to Western wind tunnel technology, Chinese researchers were forced to innovate independently, ultimately developing approaches that Western facilities haven't matched. Finally, the JF-22 reminds us that in our rapidly evolving technological landscape, yesterday's assumptions about who leads and who follows can become obsolete remarkably quickly. Every major innovation has the potential to reshape competitive dynamics between nations. Through the ongoing operation of the JF-22 hypersonic wind tunnel and the research programs it enables, we can anticipate that China will continue delivering significant aerospace achievements in the coming years. The facility provides Chinese engineers with testing capabilities that currently have no equal, offering advantages in developing everything from commercial space systems to military applications. The question now facing other nations, particularly the United States, is how to respond. Will we see a renewed international race to develop even more advanced wind tunnel capabilities? Will other countries pursue alternative testing methodologies that circumvent China's current advantage? Or will the aerospace community gradually converge around Chinese facilities as essential infrastructure for the most advanced research? What remains certain is that the era when a handful of Western nations could take technological supremacy for granted has definitively ended. The JF-22 hypersonic wind tunnel stands as concrete proof that innovation, determination, and strategic vision can rewrite the rules of global competition. What's your perspective on these developments in hypersonic wind tunnel technology? How do you think this Chinese advancement will shape the future of aerospace research and development? Share your thoughts in the comments below. To stay informed about future developments in global technology competition and aerospace innovation, make sure you're subscribed to our channel with notifications enabled. We'll continue bringing you in-depth analysis of the innovations and breakthroughs reshaping our world.